o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. The Prime Minister passes on an early election as he drops any threat of a vote on May the 2nd. Disquiet about the government's plan to tackle extremism and an attack from one of the groups that could come under increase.
The fact of the matter is that the extremism at the moment lies right within the Tory government.
We hear how anti-Semitism in one European city is provoking comparisons with the 20th century's darkest days. Also tonight...
No, it's really not that impressive. My wife is the article.
The Prince of Wales praises Kate's artistic skill before honouring his mother's legacy this evening. The Space X Factor. Elon Musk's Starship rocket has its most successful test launch yet. And we take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through until midnight tonight. Hello there, very good evening to you. After days of growing murmurs within the Conservative Party about his performance, the Prime Minister tonight decisively ruled out an early general election at the start of May. A budget that was dubbed underwhelming, the defection of a former party deputy chairman and the row over reported racist remarks by his party's biggest donor had all contributed to speculation that Rishi Sunak might go for a snap election on May the 2nd, the same day as local elections. But having shot that down tonight, there will be increased focus on what his plans are to revive the government's fortunes. All this on the day when it released its much-trailed new definition of extremism. Here's our deputy political editor, Sam Coates.
You're not doing fitness out here, you're doing...
A Prime Minister going for extra time to get his side election fit. On a visit to Gloucester Rugby Club, questions over Rishi Sunak's handling have been building for weeks.
Oh, he's dropped it.
Some of his own MPs have been pushing for a May 2nd election to end the pain. Tonight, the PM finally rules that out.
In several weeks' time, we've got elections for police and crime commissioners, for local councils, for mayors across the country. They're important elections.
And not a general election.
That's what I'm focused on. There won't be a general election on that day. But when there is a general election, what matters is the choice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
This is what the government wanted to focus on today, a new definition of what extremism is and a plan to reveal who crosses the line.
In order to protect our democratic values, it is important both to reinforce what we all have in common and to be clear and precise in identifying the dangers posed by extremism.
Groups judged to be extremist will be blocked from receiving government funding and meeting officials. No firm names today, but the first hints.
I am sure that we would agree that organisations such as the British National Socialist Movement and Patriotic Alternative, who promote neo-Nazi ideology, organisations such as the Muslim Association of Britain, and other groups such as Cage and Mend, give rise to concern for their Islamist orientation and views. We will be holding these and other organisations to account.
The new definition targets groups promoting an ideology based on violence, hatred or intolerance, so that ministers can work out what is legal but unacceptable.
Now, you might think that today's extremism announcement doesn't amount to much, given they're not changing the law and banning organisations from getting public cash when they wouldn't have got it anyway. It's hardly a big deal. But this is a huge, fundamental change in approach. It means that the people in the building behind me will get to determine what society thinks is unacceptable, even though it's not illegal. And for people who end up branded extremists on the government website, well, their life is going to get a lot more difficult.
Labour fear this announcement will be used to cause them political embarrassment in the future.
What's most important is that this is truly cross-party. This will be the test of the government. Are they really reaching out to other parties to make this is something which can go forward as a matter of consensus? Or are they going to try and use this sort of for party political process, point scoring as we go into the election?
I'm Rishi. How are you?
Kick-off in that election delayed. But politics is a team game and the Tory party is increasingly unhappy with its captain.
If it's available, yeah, why not?
Definitely do not want me.
Can going long change his fortunes?
Well, Sam joins me now live from Downing Street this evening. So he's ruled out May the 2nd, Sam. What happens next?
That's right, Emma. Look, 24 hours ago at 10 o'clock last night, I told you
that Downing Street needed to urgently shut down the rampant talk amongst Tory MPs of a May election before 7 o'clock this evening. That is exactly what happened, Rishi Sunak saying it wouldn't be May the 2nd. Now, he didn't also repeat what he said in the past, which is that his preference, his presumption was that the poll would be in the second half of the year. That means we can only really rule out an election, a general election, on May the 2nd. And given that it's his decision alone, he doesn't need to consult anybody, he can call that one. I think we can take that at face value. But Emma, I think there's a sort of broader question about why Conservative MPs were talking about an early election in the first place when he's been clear that he wanted it later in the year. And it's because of just the increasing frustration. There are MPs who worry that every day that passes, it gets worse for the Conservative Party. There are some that fear he cannot withstand the political pressure after what is likely to be an incredibly difficult set of local elections, council elections, police and crime commissioner elections. How does he deal with a disastrous aftermath of that? They worry that small boats coming across in greater numbers in the warmer weather, that is all going to be problematic. The talk of an early election was generated, in my analysis, because it was a safety valve, pressure on the Prime Minister and concerns around his performance. Now that safety valve has gone, it is unclear what happens as that pressure builds.
OK, Sam, for now, thank you very much. Well, the focus of Westminster for much of the day was that change by the government to the definition of extremism. The government now defines it as the promotion or advancement of an ideology based on violence, hatred or intolerance that aims to negate or destroy the fundamental rights and freedoms of others, or undermine, overturn or replace the UK system of liberal parliamentary democracy or democratic rights, intentionally create a permissive environment for others to achieve the results in points 1 or 2. Well, based on that definition, Michael Gove gave notice to 5 separate groups today that they would face increased scrutiny over their activities. Our chief North of England correspondent, Greg Mylan, reports now on how that message is being received.
There are places in Britain where what the government announced today strikes at the very heart. Communities like Rusholme in Manchester, where they've rallied to the cause of the Palestinian people and where they feel an attempt to silence those views. In businesses like this one, where they trade on reaching out beyond the Muslim community, there's a sense the government is intent on doing the opposite.
I find it worrying because the UK is well known for giving people the freedom of speech and people being allowed to voice their opinions and not fearing any backlash. It's creating division because it means not many people will speak up for what they stand for anymore. As Muslims, we believe in peace and inclusivity. We believe that there should be no division. We have no place for division and hate. I feel like everybody should be allowed to voice their opinions in a safe environment as long as it's not causing any harm to anyone else.
People here tell us that ever since the Palestinian flags went up on the lampposts in support of the people of Gaza, they have seen a very definite increase in Islamophobic incidents. Their fear is that the message coming from the government today will give licence to the people behind those incidents to carry out more of the same. This is the image Number 10 wants us to have of the Prime Minister, photos they released of his visit to the London Central Mosque on Monday. A very different message to the one received here at one of the groups which will be reassessed under the new extremism definition.
All we have ever done is call for equal application of justice. For 20 years, we've said that we need to deal with the problems that we're facing by applying the law equally to everybody. Now, if that is extremism, if calling for the law to be applied to Muslims the same as it's applied to any other group is a problem, then we take that with pride. But the fact of the matter is that the extremism at the moment lies right within the Tory government.
And from those affected by Islamist-inspired terror attacks like the Manchester Arena bombing, including the family of Martin Hett, a warning against encouraging anti-Muslim hate.
We are one humankind where, everybody in the community has to work together. And we've seen the evidence of that. We have Muslim leaders, we have Jewish leaders, Christian leaders, all saying the same thing, that we need to all work together and be cohesive as communities. That is really important. We do not want fragmentation.
Whether the new definition ever has a practical effect, whether it is just electioneering, what people in places like this feel is very real. Greg Milam, Sky News, Rusholme in Manchester.
Well, the upsurge in extremism is being felt right across the continent. Our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins reports now from Antwerp in Belgium on how Jews in the city are experiencing threats of violence that bear a resemblance to some of the 20th century's darkest days.
So this is really a very, very iconic shul, because this is the place where they gathered all the Jews before they deported them during World War II.
Rabbi Chaim Parnas supports 700 families at this Antwerp synagogue. But in the last 5 months, life in the community has changed.
Especially since October the 7th, there is a heightened police presence, local police presence in this whole neighborhood. It's something you feel. You walk around the street, you'll actually see the police much more often.
Belgium, like much of Europe, has seen a spike in anti-Semitism linked to the Israel-Hamas conflict, leaving many Jews afraid of becoming a target.
One of the Jewish rituals or practices, you have a mezuzah on your door, right? So you have one outside on the street. So people are asking, like, well, if I live in an area, for example, where I don't feel comfortable, can I take it off?
The rabbi understands the fear. He says slurs and intimidation are now common.
I don't know why I have to be afraid to walk down, the university corridor and someone's going to shout dirty Jew at me. For some reason, that's legitimate. As long as I'm Jewish, I become part of the conflict, and I am a target for those who are anti-Israel. People are afraid. People are afraid.
And the attacks aren't just verbal. Dozens of Jewish graves were desecrated in this cemetery in southern Belgium. Beatings and assaults have also been reported. Antwerp has the largest Hasidic Jewish population in Europe. Here, authorities received 90 reports of anti-Semitism in the 6 weeks after the 7th of October attacks.
A couple of months ago, I went with a friend, and we were chased at, and kids were screaming, "You want to die? We'll kill you."
Teenager Daniel says he's been threatened and chased with a razor.
And how does that make you feel?
Sad, unsafe. A few things that I've had to change was that I have to cover my head. I need to hide my couple and keep low profile, just because I know someone could start doing things.
Anna and Charles, yes.
Wow. So these are the guys that saved your life,
That's
really?
the one to save my life.
Holocaust survivor Regina Schlusny finds the growing hostility deeply disturbing. She says some Jews are so scared they've packed bags in case they have to flee.
We really feel it, that it's much worse than it was before. People who had family who didn't come back from Auschwitz, they certainly do. They are very scared. They think it's going to start again.
Security has been stepped up, but it doesn't stop the fear or heal the divisions being opened by the ongoing war. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Antwerp. There are tentative signs tonight of a movement towards a possible ceasefire in Gaza, on one side at least. And one of the most important politicians in the United States Congress has delivered a damning verdict on Israel's Prime Minister. To our US correspondent now, Mark Stone, who's live in Washington for us this evening. And what more can you tell us, Mark?
Yes, a flurry of developments in the last few hours. More on Chuck Schumer in a moment. But first of all, a statement from Hamas has been released within the last hour. Now, this is a statement that has been expected and waited for quite some time. It is Hamas's response to an Israeli proposal that would, if both sides can agree, create a humanitarian pause, a ceasefire of up to 6 weeks, and allow for prisoners being held in Israel, Palestinian prisoners to be released, and the hostages, some of them, to be released as well. We don't have the details of the Hamas response, but it is literal movement in the sense that they have released a brief statement. The Israelis, we understand, have got the detailed response, and tonight they have said that it is still based on unrealistic demands, but movement certainly on that, which we should watch over the course of tomorrow when the Israeli War Cabinet will meet. I can also tell you tonight that the reports coming in of an Israeli airstrike in Gaza City. Palestinian sources are saying that more than 10 people have been killed in that, in an area where Palestinians were waiting for aid. That is a significant development. Again, we'll get more on that overnight. And the political backdrop here in Washington is extraordinary language from Chuck Schumer, the majority leader in the Senate. In that building on the floor was making pretty plain remarks about what he thinks should happen in Israel now that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu needs to go. He is, I think, articulating language that the administration, the Biden administration, is distancing itself from publicly, but privately within the White House. There is a view that Netanyahu is an obstacle to peace.
OK, Mark, we'll leave it there. Mark Stone live in Washington, D.C. for us. Thank you. The Prince of Wales and his brother have both spoken at a ceremony this evening paying tribute to their mother. Prince Harry appeared via video link at the Diana Legacy Award, while Prince William attended in person. Earlier, he paid tribute to his wife's artistic skills while visiting a youth centre. Meanwhile, Prince Harry's wife, Meghan, was focused this evening on launching a new business venture with a cryptic Instagram tease. Our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, reports.
This was one place where everyone wasn't just talking about him. An awards ceremony recognising young people who are maintaining Princess Diana's legacy. And after a difficult few weeks for William, time to reflect on how she's still a guide to him.
She taught me that everyone has the potential to give something back. That everyone in need deserves a supporting hand in life. That legacy is something that both Catherine and I sought to focus on through our work.
He'd spent the morning trying to get the attention back on the things that matter, visiting a new youth centre in West London. Although there was this little reminder of the recent mess they've faced.
No, it's really not that impressive. My wife is the arty one.
It was, after all, the princess who had to apologise after altering her Mother's Day picture, stirring up another social media storm, so little surprise that William isn't a big fan of mobile phones right now.
But the grown-ups are guilty of it too, so don't think we think, we've got to be better on our phones too. It's been ages on phones.
Apparently playing on his mind so much, he mentioned it twice.
How much time do you think you spend on your phone a day? We can all be honest about this. Trust me, everyone in this room has got something to be honest about on their phone.
In full fatherly mode, it's been the pressure on his wife and children that I'm told is getting to him the most. All you could say rooted in what happened to his mother and means he won't just bow to media pressure to say more. Tessie Ojo from the Diana Award has known him for over 20 years and witnessed how he's developed this way of coping during difficult times.
That ability to focus on service, the ability to drown out the noise and say, I'm here for this and this is what I'm going to focus on, irrespective of what's happening externally. When I think about Princess Diana, that's something that we celebrate. We talk about her compassion, her resilience, her courage is the word that we use a lot, and I see that reflected in her sons.
Prince Harry is also due to speak to the winners in a video call later. When problems around his brother blew up in recent years, William just kept the focus on their work. This time round, it is harder with no Kate by his side, and the pressure only likely to persist until we see the princess again. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
Northern Ireland's First Minister has urged the United States to bring the same critical approach to pursuing a ceasefire in the Middle East as it once brought to Northern Ireland. Michelle O'Neill and her power-sharing partner, Deputy First Minister Emma Little-Pengelly, are on a trade machine to Washington, where they'll meet President Biden at events marking St. Patrick's Day. Our senior Ireland correspondent, David Blevins, spoke to them.
They are the toast of Capitol Hill, Michelle O'Neill and Emma Little-Pengelly, the two women sharing power in Northern Ireland. And the First Minister is urging the United States to bring the same focus to peace in the Middle East.
I will always recognise the role, the constructive role that the US administrations have always played in terms of the peace process. I don't believe we would have had the Good Friday Accord if we had not have had the role of the United States, so we're grateful for that. But I think that same critical approach, that practical approach that they applied to the Irish peace process, they need to now apply in the Middle East, and I will urge that in every opportunity on this trip.
This is their first international outing, a mission to attract inward investment.
We can't do this alone. We can't grow our economy alone. We need that foreign direct investment, and we want to work with our universities, with those businesses, with those that are willing to invest to really make Northern Ireland a thriving, better place that we want it to be.
And in their first joint interview, they were presenting a united front.
And how is the relationship in this honeymoon period? Have we had a row yet, or is it all going swimmingly?
No, we've been determined to build that good working relationship because, look, in politics there will always be challenges ahead. We know that. We know there's big issues coming up. But what we do know is actually by trying to work together constructively through that, by building those robust relationships, that gives us the best chance of finding those solutions.
America's a deeply polarised place. It's just decided that two elderly men are going to compete again for the presidency. What can it learn from two women who are not ready for retirement, sharing power, compromising at the helm of government in Northern Ireland?
Well, I wouldn't like to think we're getting ready to retire, David. We only got into the job. But listen, domestic politics is for the American people to discuss. For us at home, we're relatively young, we could still say that, in the executive, and determined to lead and to do our best. You know, people have their own observations about American politics. I'll stay out of that and use this week to beat our own drum in terms of what we're trying to achieve in terms of investment.
For decades, the United States has sent peace envoys to Northern Ireland. But this is a role reversal. The two women who share power in Belfast, now showing a deeply divided America, what can be achieved when people compromise. One the daughter of an IRA man, the other the daughter of a loyalist gun runner. Together, they are a symbol to the world of peacemaking. David Blevins, Sky News in Washington.
Sky News can exclusively reveal that nearly 100 British troops may have been exposed to a cancer-causing chemical while guarding a water treatment plant in Iraq in 2003. 10 veterans who guarded the site say they feel betrayed by the UK government after struggling with a range of health problems. Earlier this evening, former officer Tony Waters shared his personal experience.
I've noticed over the years that you just itch, and you itch till you bleed. We were never given a briefing. We were never told of any chemicals. We carried a respirator as part of your general webbing. Your respirator was on your side. We were never told to carry NBC kit with us. That was left back in our accommodation. At no time we were told there was ever a threat or a risk of being exposed to any sort of chemical.
Well, the Ministry of Defence has responded to our report, saying as soon as we were alerted to the possible exposure of sodium dichromate, an environmental survey was conducted to evaluate typical exposure at Quamat Ali. Anyone who requires medical treatment can receive it through the Defence Medical Services and other appropriate services. New NHS figures show how cancer referral targets are being missed, although the overall size of the waiting list has fallen. The disease came under increased focus after the diagnosis of the King with a form of cancer earlier on this year. Our health correspondent reports now from the Royal Preston Hospital.
Lynn Pelly.
Lynn Pelly's worst fears came true last November.
Come through. Thank you.
She noticed a change in the size of her breasts. A second mammogram confirmed it was cancer.
You just get yourself ready when you're ready. Thanks very much.
She's undergoing radiotherapy here at Preston Hospital.
What we're going to be using here is something called surface-guided radiotherapy. So what they will do is they will get Lynn on the bed and they use infrared cameras to line up Lynn's surface.
How crucial is technology like this in breaking the backlog of cancer patients?
Absolutely crucial. As time's gone on, we've got systems that, as well as making things more and more accurate, and then we're able to treat more patients, which should, in the future, impact on the cancer waiting list.
I've had the operation, you know, hopefully the cancer is gone. So, I mean, there's always a possibility of the cancer coming back.
Waiting for a cancer test result is extremely worrying.
Examinations really well, so I did.
So the hospital's colorectal team use advanced clinical practitioners like Claire to remove any uncertainty as fast as they can.
Not knowing that patients tell us that it's a really, really difficult time.
they've been told by the GP they could possibly have cancer. We want to get them to their diagnostic test as quickly as possible, to reassure them, to tell them quickly that they've not got cancer. And for patients that do have cancer, we need to get them diagnosed really quickly.
King Charles's recent cancer diagnosis has helped to refocus attention on the disease. The government has scrapped its long-standing cancer plan and instead it's merged it with its wider major conditions strategy. But NHS waiting times for cancer treatment are at record highs and demand is only set to grow. The government says it's invested £2.3 billion to speed up cancer diagnosis, and new research shows fewer middle-aged people are dying from cancer than at any point over the past 25 years. But some projections warn there will be an extra 2,000 cancer patients a week by 2040. Lynn's instinct might have saved her life. Now she hopes her future will stay cancer-free. Ashish Joshi, Sky News in Preston.
Talk of racism, extremism and MP safety have dominated Westminster this week, but for many outside the political bubble, there's a feeling that ongoing battles like the cost of living and the NHS are being ignored. That's at the top of voters' minds in Grimsby and Cleethorpes, which will be hotly contested by the main parties, although not on May the 2nd, as we reported earlier. They're the focus of our Target Towns project, and from there, our national correspondent Tom Parmenter sent us this report.
It's old school at Blundell Park. Just ask at the snack shack what's wrong with British politics.
It's the narrative. Do you believe the narrative of what any politician tells you?
Do you?
No, I don't. I don't. People just cannot speak the truth.
MK Dons were the visitors in League Two, and the Codheads, as the home fans are known, really needed a win.
If you don't live in hope, you've got nothing, have you?
The ground is just in neighbouring Cleethorpes, but when the seat of Great Grimsby backed Boris Johnson's Conservatives after decades with Labour, it was a big switch. The former PM even wore the club's GTFC bobble hat when appearing at the COVID inquiry. Not everybody liked it. What did you make of that?
It's a cool hat. It's probably not the coolest person to be wearing it, but yeah. Sorry, Boris.
So apart from a win, what else do they want?
I want to know what they're going to do about the health system at the moment, the waiting list, the adult social care crisis that we're in, the cost of living, just what they're going to do. It's a long list, yeah.
I'm a retired police officer, and it's just absolutely a demoralised service, the same as the NHS. The whole thing's in crisis.
The club chairman, who's backing Labour, believes something more fundamental is needed.
What people will be looking for is an honest conversation with people that are prepared to turn up and have difficult conversations with everyone in our community. But everyone as citizens needs to step into it and take ownership of the future that they want, or rather than just being passive recipients of the idea that government will solve everything, because they won't, but they have a role to play.
With Grimsby 1-0 up at half-time, the hot dogs were ready. What do you think this country needs at the moment?
I think it needs someone with a bit of balls to sort it out and take it by the horns and actually shake it up a bit.
And that's becoming a familiar sentiment. It's not that people aren't optimistic, it's that they're not optimistic in politics and politicians. They got the win and left happy. But for anyone looking for votes here this year, this is a tough crowd. Tom Parmenter, Sky News.
Now, it might have ended its journey by being burned up in the Earth's atmosphere, but Elon Musk will take some satisfaction from what was the most successful test flight yet for his SpaceX rocket. Starship is the world's biggest and most powerful rocket, and at nearly 120 metres tall, it's intended to carry astronauts to the moon this decade. Our science editor, Tom Clark, has more.
3, 2, 3, 1.
Apart from the 5,000-ton rocket, there was a lot riding on this launch.
Would it be third time lucky trying to get Starship, the largest object ever to fly, into orbit? Liftoff was flawless, and with camera technology advancing as fast as rockets, broadcast live in HD.
And then moving into the boost back burn, setting it up.
Starship separated from its super heavy booster exactly as planned. A milestone, as this is where things came explosively unstuck during a test last November. The booster, a reusable design, was supposed to slow to a hover above the Gulf of Mexico, but some of its engines failed and it crashed to the sea.
We're getting a few engines.
But by then, Starship was cruising in orbit. Cameras on board captured key tests like a payload slot opening and closing. Then came the ultimate goal.
Oh man, we can see the heating on those flaps as we're starting to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere.
Using Starship's 4 movable fins to orientate its 18,000 heat-proof tiles towards Earth for re-entry. But the unprecedented images of the deorbiting spacecraft were to be its last. Signal was lost, the spacecraft probably disintegrating over the Indian Ocean.
Or what it would be getting.
This is not a failure by any means. For me, if you learn from tests, then it's a success. We will find out how much was learned, for sure, but from what I saw, there were lots of milestones hit there.
Starship is the only spacecraft big enough to carry people to the moon and beyond. Many question Elon Musk's interplanetary ambitions, even the business case for projects like Starship. But last year, his company launched more payloads into space than any other company or country combined. Some proof of Musk's motto, if you're not failing, you're not innovating enough. Tom Clark, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up next, we're going to take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. And tonight we're joined by Deputy Editor for Conservative Home, Henry Hill, and we're also joined tonight by the Independent's political correspondent, Zoe Grunewald. More from them in just a few minutes. Among the stories we'll be discussing tonight will be on the front of the Eye's front page. Its headline reading, Number 10 anxiety grows as angry Tories question Sunak's authority. More on that in a few minutes' time. We'll be right back after this. Hi there, a very good evening to you. You're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive here in the Sky News Centre. It's time to see what's making headlines tonight with Henry Hill, Deputy Editor at Conservative Home, and the Independent's political correspondent, Zoe Grunewald. Nice to have you both on the programme tonight. Thanks for joining us. They'll be with us from now just before midnight tonight. So let's have a look at what's on those front pages coming into us right now. Let's start with the FT. The front page says the working day for MPs hits a record low under Rishi Sunak. The front of the Eye says there's growing anxiety in number 10 as angry Tories question the Prime Minister's authority. And The Guardian reports that Tories are urging Rishi Sunak to give back a further £5 million from Frank Hester after the donor made alleged racist comments about Diane Abbott. On to the Daily Mail. It reports that Russia jammed the GPS system on Defence Secretary Grant Shapps' RAF jet, triggering a major security alert as it flew over the Baltic Sea. Onto the front of the Times, official data shows 20,000 people each month are off work with poor mental health. Paramedics are growing concerned about the prospect of electric ambulances, saying they'll delay response times. That's according to the Daily Telegraph. The Express leads on a victory for Esther Ranson as MPs will stage a debate on the legalisation of assisted dying. Onto the Metro, its front page tomorrow morning looks a little like this. Reports on the millions of people negatively impacted by Britain's air traffic control system last year. Remember that? Because of its staff working from home, it says. And the Daily Star reports that NASA has found molecules of alcohol in the solar system. Now, a reminder that by scanning the QR code that you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch with us tonight. And as a reminder for you tonight, we're joined by Henry Hill, Deputy Editor at Conservative Home, and the Independent's political correspondent, Zoe Grunewald. Good to see you both this evening. Thanks so much. Right, so let's start with the front page of the Eye newspaper. Why not? Pretty grim reading for Rishi Sunak, if he's got the papers as quickly as we have here on Sky News tonight. Number 10 anxiety grows as angry Tories question Sunak authority. It's been a lot been going on, hasn't there, for the Prime Minister this week. Zoe, do you want to take this away? What do you make of this?
Yeah, so this comes on the back of Sunak earlier denying that there would be a early May election. So he ruled out May 2nd, which was the date that was kind of flying around Westminster a lot this week. And the reason it's been flying around is because it just seems like every week the Conservatives' prospects seem to get worse and worse. There's always a new political row. There's always a new mess that somebody has made, whether it's MPs defecting to other parties, whether it's the Prime Minister saying the wrong thing in the House of Commons, whether it's the leaking of their new extremism definition beforehand and then MPs not being very happy with the results. So what you see here is reporting of MPs basically just at their wits' end, very frustrated, wondering if Sunak actually can turn around their prospects at an election. And I think there is, a real split down the Conservative MPs. Half want to see them go long. They think that things could change over the summer, the economy could pick up. The other half, I think it could only get worse. There's lots of things that could get worse over the summer. You could see more small boats crossings, more people renewing their mortgages, more political catastrophes. So what we have here is a real split in the Conservative Party over what Sunak should do.
OK, this is also in the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Let's have a look at that while we continue the conversation. Sunak stamping out talk of a general election on May the 2nd. Of course, we broke that here on Sky News as well with our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, in the last hour or so. Henry, let's bring you in here now. I mean, from your contacts and the people that you talk to within the Conservative Party, does this paint a fair picture? And what are your thoughts about May the 2nd being categorically ruled out by the Prime Minister today?
It never seemed likely that Rishi Sunak would go for a May election. Nothing about him and the way he's governed and the way he is as a politician suggests that he wouldn't take an extra 6 months.
Some people were betting on it.
If they were available. Well, I mean, that's how bookies make their money, ultimately. If everyone got the bets right, there wouldn't be a gambling industry. It would have been better for the party to have a May election because May is the local elections and as it stands, based on where the Tories are in the polls, they are going to lose hundreds of councillors. And that means that those are all activists that they won't have at the general election. Local councillors are increasingly every party's activist base. They're the ones who go out and knock on the doors. So from the party's perspective, it would have been better to go in May. Also, as Zoe said, there is a widespread view that there are more downside risks for the next 6 months, an extra 6 months, than gains. Maybe the economy will improve a bit, but if you're judging things on the last year, there's a greater chance that something else goes badly wrong. You'll have crossings. There's a chance there's another NHS crisis. More local councils could go bankrupt and catch fire and all the rest of it. So there are huge risks. And it is interesting, the mood shift being described in the Eye, because...
Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, but to an extent, because there is a general sense, I think, that most Conservatives think that the next election is not winnable. There's a question of whether how badly you lose. Maybe you can fight Labour closer than people think. And this loops back into why some of them are angry about the delay. If you're actively mishandling political stories in the way that Downing Street is at the moment, if you're sort of failing to call out a very obvious racist statement as racist, to pick a hypothetical example, then that just means that that next 6 months becomes a certainty of problems, right? If you've got a deft Prime Minister, he's doing some things that maybe you like, maybe he's laying some traps for Labour, maybe you think, OK, 6 months, whatever. But if you're looking at the Downing Street operation and you genuinely don't think that it has what it takes to handle difficult stories and crises, then you're going to think it's all risk hanging on till November.
Right, OK, let's move on to the Financial Times. Another big political story that it says it's uncovered. This is from the FT Investigates, or an analysis at the very least, that they have found working hours for Commons hits a record low under Rishi Sunak. They claim the working day for MPs in the House of Commons chamber has been shorter on average this parliamentary session than any other in the past quarter of a century, according to an FT analysis. Zoe, what do you make of this?
Well, I work in the House of Commons as a journalist in the lobby, and you can really feel this. They seem to clock off before we do. And I think it's worth pointing out that it's not just business in the chamber that MPs are undertaking. They're also doing their constituency duties. And then, of course, they have things like select committees. They have, backbench business. They have plenty of meetings. So it's not like all MPs just go home at 4 o'clock every day. But you can really feel that there's a dearth of legislation and a dearth of policy with this particular government. And this, I'm sorry to bring it back to the election, but is one of the most convincing arguments, I think, genuinely, for having a May election, is that this isn't a government or a Prime Minister that has a great deal of ideas, which would be fine if the country didn't have a great deal of problems, but it does. And I think what we're seeing is the Commons clocking off early, very little vision from Rishi Sunak, very little leadership. The Conservative Party conference, his offering was basically a smoke-free generation and maths to A-level, which is not, it doesn't really deal with the huge problems, some of which Henry said out earlier, that we're dealing with, bankrupt councils, NHS waiting lists, cost of living crisis. And really, with the kind of state the country's in, you would expect Parliament to be sitting, legislation to be passed, plenty of debates, plenty of scrutiny around policy. And really, the only big piece of legislation we've had recently is the Rwanda bill.
OK. I just want to add, actually, before we move on, that they've said that they're sitting for 7 hours a day, 7 hours and 9 minutes a day, which is a record low since New Labour came into power, and they were sitting over 9 hours. Some people might think that's still quite a lot. But anyway, we'll come back to that in a minute, because I want to move on, while we've still got time, to the front page of The Guardian and some foreign news now. This is, of course, coming from the United States. The US Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, very, very powerful politician, as we know, labelling the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as an obstacle to peace. And he's now calling for fresh elections in Israel. What's your take on this, Henry?
Whatever you think of Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's a very divisive politician, I don't think this is the kind of thing America should be engaging in, telling another democratic country, when to hold its own elections. Fundamentally, Israel's government is Israel's business. It is a war government that includes parties from most of the Israeli Knesset, I think, at this point. It is, I think the analysis is perhaps true to an extent. The kind of perennial problem with Netanyahu in recent years is basically that if he leaves office, he's going to be prosecuted for a lot of things. But he keeps managing to get back into the Prime Minister's office, which means that he's then immune. It also means he has no incentive to step down. So he will cling on for as long as he can. So is Netanyahu a barrier to peace? Potentially, but I think we shouldn't overestimate his individual role. There are a lot of right-wingers in the Israeli parliament who are just as committed to his policy as he is. But
it's stark that Chuck Schumer, who's been a huge supporter of Israel, is now saying this. The White House apparently heard about his speech in advance, necessarily endorsing it, but not saying he can't say it. So what is your take on it?
Well, I think, it's worth pointing out that there's people living in Israel who support Israel's right to exist but don't agree with Benjamin Netanyahu's policies and really, really object to what's going on in Gaza at the minute. I don't think that's an uncommon or a particularly controversial view. I think it would take most people a lot to look at the scenes coming out of Palestine and not be heartbroken by them. So I think what you're seeing now is quite interesting. It does seem like a real turning of the mood, where people are questioning the Israeli Prime Minister's approach to this conflict and wondering if really there is ever going to be an end to peace if you have a leader who, you know, rules out a two-state solution, who refuses to kind of engage, and if actually a more diplomatic leader who represents the will of most of the people in Israel would be much more helpful.
OK, one final look at the front page of the Daily Mail before we have to go to our break. Really interesting story, this. Russia attacks Shap's RAF jet by jamming GPS. It's, of course, talking about the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, potentially being in a very dangerous situation in mid-flight. Tell us a bit more about it, Henry.
Well, I mean, basically, he was flying near to Kaliningrad, which is a bit of what used to be Germany that Russia randomly owns after World War II, and his plane lost access to GPS. Now, that's not the end of the world. It's not as if they actively attacked the plane's electronics or avionics. It wasn't going to fall out of the sky, but it did mean that it suddenly didn't know where it was in relation to the global flight network. Now, it doesn't say here whether or not this was a deliberate targeted attack. Been suggested outside this room that actually it's just that Russia has this kind of blanket policy in its airspace, and maybe he was flying too close to it. But it's a reminder of the kind of thing that happens if we were to end up fighting Russia. We would be in all kinds of difficult situations like that.
OK, Henry and Zoe, thank you very much. Plenty more from both of you in just a couple of minutes' time. In the meantime, we're going to have a look at more of the top stories in the front pages, including the front of The Guardian, saying Tories are urging Rishi Sunak to give back a further £5 million donation from Frank Hester. Of course, that story has been rolling all week. Plenty more on that after this short break. We'll see you in a moment.
Well, I kept him to his 4 months. I did everything I could to keep him, but back there, no flat, no nursery, no job, you know, the whole things went together. At 4 months, I finally sort of threw in the towel and thought it wasn't fair on him to see him dragged up in awful situations. And so I gave him up, and there wasn't a day went past when I didn't be sad about it. I wouldn't say I regret it, because I knew that the people he'd gone to were nice people, and that's been proved since the happy ending. But always there was this thing like the missing child. I mean, I've got 3 other daughters, but their big brother, and I used to tell them about him, and it just never went away. My mother died when I was very young, was Irish. Her relatives over in Ireland didn't know that Leslie Pierce, the novelist, was Leslie Sargent, as they knew me before. I kept away from them because they were Roman Catholics, and I thought they'd disapprove of me having had a baby, so I hadn't seen them. But chance threw them back at me. I was on the radio in Ireland, and I said I had relatives in Roscommon, and as a result of that, they invited me to this big family party. So anyway, we're at the party together, and I'm sitting next to them, and I'm showing them some old photographs I had. One of them was of my father, and I said, well, he's of no interest to you, but his name's funny, he was Sergeant Sargent. And they looked at each other as if I was nuts. And I thought, oh dear, and I went and talked to somebody that didn't think I was nuts. So meanwhile, they go to one of my cousins and say, we've been looking for her. Her son's trying to find her. He's a marine engineer, so he does a lot of work in cold countries like Norway and that kind of thing, on big ice-breaking ships and that sort of stuff. He was coming through London, so we met for lunch, and I met him at the Haymarket. And in the hotel I was staying in.
And when was this, like a year or so ago?
No, it was 2 years ago, yes, because he was 58 then, and he's coming up for 60 this summer.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing. He sort of walked through the door, and they've still got the same, even the photographs of him, you can still see the baby face is still there as a grown man. You know, I just wanted to get hold of his cheeks and kiss him, and because I didn't, because we've got the British Reserve, you know, we'll save that. When all the time I'm wanting to put him on my shoulder. Yeah.
Hi there, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with you once again, Henry Hill and Zoe Grunewald. Good to see you this evening. Let's start by having a look at the front page of the Guardian, excuse me. Tories urged to give back a further £5 million from Hester. Of course, Hester is Frank Hester, whose comments about Diane Abbott have been condemned as racist and misogynist this week. He's reported to have donated £10 million. This is an extra £5 million they found. Zoe, do you want to take this one away?
Sure. So on top of the £10 million that's already been discussed quite a bit this week, it's now been revealed that the Conservative Party is sitting on a further £5 million. So the reason they're sitting on it is because previously we knew how much Mr Hester had donated from the Electoral Commission records, but they have not been declared yet. They're sort of released at the end of the year. So this is a bit of, good old-fashioned journalism, finding out that the Conservatives are indeed sat on another donation from Hester. This just brings this whole row back into the picture, because what are they going to do with this now? Now, I think, there's a reasonable argument that the 10 million before maybe was already pledged, it was spent, it was accepted, and it was declared without knowing the comments that Mr Hester had made. But when we know that they are now, in receipt of this £5 million, deciding whether or not to declare it, deciding whether or not to pledge it, it really is a question about, how much does that money mean to you? And are you willing to say you will not take this man's donations because of the racist comments he made about Diane Abbott?
OK, we believe it would have been declared, just not published yet. Is that correct? And we'll find out in the next Electoral Commission update of nations due in early June, as you mentioned. What's your position on this? Would you say, Henry, what would the Conservative Home position be? Do you think they should give the money back? Can they afford to give the money back?
My position is not the Conservative Home position, just have to... I'm not speaking ex cathedra. But I think they've managed to mishandle this, because personally I think you can keep the donation, because they didn't know at the time that they accepted the money, right? And generally, I take a fairly dim view of anyone being asked to endlessly return donations. They took the money in good faith.
Even though he's been condemned as a...
but it's not... But they didn't take it when they knew he had those views, and presumably they haven't pledged it to a £10 million racism and misogyny fund, right? So I think that's fine. I think they can then take no more of his money and disassociate themselves, but I don't think they should necessarily have to give it back. But what's remarkable about this is that you could still have just called him out and said it was racist. And I think that what's really baffling to me about this story is when I first heard it breaking, and I heard that ministers were umming and ahhing about whether or not, and then I read what he said, and I was like, this is one of the most, obviously racist comments that we've had in ages, right? It's not ambiguous at all. So they could, I think, have staunched the bleeding. There would still have been some anger, but they could have staunched the bleeding if they just said, look, we took this money in good faith, this is unacceptable, it is racist, and we're not taking any more. But instead, this story is running and running because they haven't managed to draw that line.
OK, let's just squeeze in one more if we can. Onto the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Fears for patients at NHS Net Zero drive. Apparently, ambulances could become electric, at least some of them, and there are concerns about delayed response times. Zoe, what do you think of this?
Yeah, so this is, one of those real kind of policy issues, which is that we have a lot of pressure on the NHS at the minute, a lot of concern about how money is being spent, if it's being spent well. And we also have concerns, increasingly, or the politicisation of net zero. And you have the two come together here to basically say that the push for net zero may further affect the issues that people are experiencing when they interact with the NHS. So the concern here is that these electric ambulances, with all the costs of recharging them, with all of that, will increase delays, will make it more expensive. And I think there are some legitimate concerns here. I don't think we are fully equipped in this country for the demands that will be placed on the grid when we try and electrify all our cars. However, I don't think that's a good reason to give up. I think the net zero targets are incredibly important. They're not just important for us, but our international obligations too.
We need to leave it there. Zoe, thanks very much. Henry, thanks to you too. You're going to stay where you are, and we'll be back with you in the next hour. In the meantime, let's take a look at the weather for you now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The weather will stay unsettled over the coming days. It'll be mild for most, with temperatures above average for this time of year. Overnight rain over Northern Ireland and Northern England will slide away southeastwards throughout the morning, with much of Ireland becoming dry. It'll be a mild start for areas south of the rain belt, with temperatures in the double figures. The far north, a chilly start to the day with an early frost. There'll also be some showers, these turning wintry over higher ground.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.